The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the TC Dojo from Single Sourcing Solutions. The TC Dojo is a TechCom community that is driven by you. Tell us what you want to learn. You choose the topics and we find the experts. In the TC Dojo session this morning, we have coming to us live in a late afternoon on his end, we are fortunate to have Rob Gillespie joining us as the visiting TC Dojo master today. You probably recognize his name, even if, like me, you haven't had the opportunity to meet him in person. Rob Gillespie is a senior DITA expert based in Europe. He has worked in several different industries and is in demand for that expertise. He's best known for being results-oriented and has well-developed motivational skills. He has the ability to inspire others to achieve. His ability is to achieve consensus by employing exceptional advocacy skills. And he promotes innovative solutions in his organizations and others. Most of all, he's a strategic thinker. He has the ability to identify, diagnose, and solve challenges, and we are thrilled that Rob agreed to join us in the TC Dojo today. Rob wants you to ask questions as he goes, so be sure to type them into the window as we go. If you want to ask your questions to him directly, just put that in there. I'll unmute you when he reaches the next natural break. Rob, I'm going to pass presentation to you. Show your screen, and it's all yours. Looks great.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Liz. And I will try to go slowly because I have a tendency to gabble when I get excited. So are we all ready? And I think we should start. So I guess you've seen the agenda, and I'm not going to go through it at all, but I want to cover at first sort of the basics of topic-based writing, then something a little bit more about how we might use it, and then, well, what's coming or has already come for some people, and how topic-based writing is still relevant, and in fact, perhaps more relevant than some of the more conventional and used management systems for content. So I will start with a confession or two. So yeah, I come from a software background, so I'm going to be mainly talking about software, though ironically, the project that I saw that most incorporates the ideas about how you might be able to dynamically use topic-based content and deliver continuously was a hardware-based project, so maybe it's not just about software at all. And then I'm going to talk about something which is a sort of conventional view of topic-based writing, and then perhaps suggest that you don't really do that. But that's just from my experience. And so we'll start with the basic nature of a topic. So classically, this is the sort of definition that you usually see or something like it, a discrete piece of content about a particular subject. And pretty much that's the only thing I really agree with, but we'll talk about the more conventional view first. So with a certain purpose, well, all content that we create should always have a purpose, and I don't think the idea of purpose should be specific to topics. I mean, there's no point in our existence of technical writing, technical writers, if what we write doesn't have a very clear purpose and value. Then we get into probably the most controversial area of this standaloneness, or every page is one. I think the very nature of standalone is quite confusing, or confuses certainly new learners. I mean, standalone for me simply means there's other content, because nothing can really stand alone. The whole nature of standalone is that we're working within a rich ecosystem of content. And this question of reusability, for me, this is a management question and not actually inherently in the nature of a topic. I've seen many systems where people use topic-based writing and have no interest in actually reusing any of it. Equally, of course, without topics, or certainly topics help reusability in more conventional systems like DITA, but I don't think inherently reusability is actually part of the definition of a topic. For me, the only and certainly the most important definition is this idea of discreteness and a relationship between the title and the contents itself. I'll go on to titles a bit later. So, as I've indicated, I don't really agree with this conventional definition. For me, yeah, reusability is a potential benefit of topic-based writing, but it's not inherently part of its nature. And topic-based writing has power that sort of, in a sense, exceeds reusability. And because reusability can be achieved in so many ways, I think we should separate the sort of management of content from actually how we decide to structure it in a content or writing sense. I think it starts becoming quite confusing. And anyway, if you really want reusability, you have to do a lot more than topic-based writing, as probably people have found who have adopted DITA primarily with the hope of attaining reusability and found it's a little bit more difficult than first advertised. This idea of purposefulness, I mean, I've tended to work in quite commercial environments. If the content that I don't create doesn't have value or it doesn't satisfy a very clear need, then quite probably I'm not going to have my contract extended, I'm going to get fired or something similar. So this idea of purposefulness should be inherent in everything we do, and I don't think it's sort of specific to topics. Purposefulness, however, could be useful when we start talking about how we manage projects, and particularly where we're talking about very dynamic projects, so something like DevOps, for instance, where you might be using a ticketing system. Then actually purposefulness is really related to the management of the writers and what they're doing, but isn't necessarily inherent in the topic idea itself. I've talked about standalone. I don't really want to talk too much more about standalone, but there's some excellent articles about Frankenbooks and the dangers of this idea or taking this idea too far. And I've provided some links if you haven't already read them yourself. And for me, yeah, it's this discrete information, the discrete piece of content that actually makes topic-based writing, and it's totally separate from the management side of it. And then we need to be very clear about what topic-based writing is. I mean, it's certainly not a theory of information design, except perhaps on topic level. It's clear it doesn't tell you anything about what you might want to build with topics later, and it doesn't really try to. It's very, very focused on what it does do and what it doesn't do. DITA, well, I don't think it's quite so focused, because many people sell it as a theory of information design, but basically it's a composition mechanism and sets of composition mechanisms. Again, doesn't give you a design theory, and it is not really coherent in itself about what you can achieve with it, or actually what DITA is supposed to achieve for you. And for me, again, this idea of standalone is relevant here as well, because all it simply means for me is there has to be something else. That we are talking, yes, we are talking about topics, but we're also talking about a bigger ecosystem that we can create. We certainly don't have to use DITA, and I will demonstrate some ways that I've used topics in ways which are not compliant with DITA at all, but they're certainly very powerful and very useful mechanisms, and they build upon the essential nature and value of topic-based writing. So this is my pictorial representation of this. One, we have to be careful what's the chicken and what's the egg, and we should separate what we're actually going to do with the egg from the actual, the egg itself. So we can create many wonderful and beautiful things with the egg or the nature of a topic, but first we should worry about the topic first and not worry about what we're going to do with it. And certainly for many writers, I don't think it's even necessary to sort of contaminate them with ideas and management before they actually are skilled and able writers. I think it's a totally separate issue. So we'll start with the basics of topic morphology. So this is the classical view. A topic is basically made up of a title, perhaps a short description or something similar, depending on which sort of content management mechanism or theory that you ascribe to, and then the content itself. For me, I think it's a little bit more complicated, or rather simpler than that. For me, the only mandatory part of this is actually the content, and I'm pretty sure we're at the point where titles will serve more purpose as an internal management issue than it will as being externally visible. But I'll go on to why I say that a bit later. For me, I actually use short descriptions, just not in the way that DITA describes them, or I use them simply because they're helpful for people to decide whether they're going to read what actually becomes a much longer piece of work than simple topics. There's many topics joined together to, to create an answer or a methodology. And I use the short description basically to help them decide if they want to read that thing that they found by whatever mechanism they've found it. But I don't use it in the classical DITA sense, but I do find them useful. But certainly I don't see they're mandatory in topic-based writing. For me, the biggest issue, of course, even if you abandon the idea of titles being mandatory, is the idea of this conceptual consistency, or the coherence of the idea. And this is the essential nature of topics. And if you're in a classical DITA mode, then you've got to basically have this consistency across the title, the short description, and the content. It's really hard to describe what it means or what it is. I mean, it's easy to say what is a bad topic, and also what is a good topic, but it's very hard to actually set very clear rules about how to actually create these things. All I really say is that when you actually read the contents and having regard to the title, you shouldn't be shocked by what you find. And I think that is a reasonable test for this idea of conceptual consistency. And I think it's the very heart of topic-based writing. But into the more classical view, titles have a slightly wider purpose as well, and not just defining this conceptual consistency. And this is the more obvious things about findability and orientation. My problem with these is that it assumes many things, not least we have documents, we have document sets, and we have text-based search and find. And I think these assumptions cannot be entirely relied upon, and certainly in the future I think they can be relied upon less. And therefore I think it's a lot easier to question the idea of the existence or the use of titles or the permanence of titles if we don't necessarily assume that we're going to have such things as documents, document sets, and text-based search and find. I think this is very much going to be seen in the very near future as quite old school view of things. And for me, I use topic titles basically to allocate work, not only to myself but also to the developers that I'm working with, so they have a clear idea of what they should be doing. The title doesn't necessarily mean the same, and actually at the moment I'm still using titles in what I'm doing, but I will show a methodology which would possibly eliminate titles or permanent titles, and I'll sort of explain why as we get to that. And probably the biggest issue is, does size matter in topics? And for me, this is a basic question. This is just the basic rules that govern good technical writing, this idea of simplicity, clarity, consistency, and minimalism. And if we apply all these things to topics, we soon come to the idea that yes, an ideal topic is unlikely to be the size of War and Peace. So it's going to be a relatively short thing, but to say it's got to be 3 paragraphs long or 21 lines long or 400 words long, I don't think that's particularly helpful. There can be many good grounds where they'll vary between 1 paragraph, 1 line even perhaps, and a number of paragraphs, a couple of figures, whatever it happens to be. I think all these things are perfectly valid and viable. But I think if we apply these basic ideas, then we can actually say, in most cases, whether a topic is a good topic or a bad topic. And I'm not going to go into them too much because I'm 99% certain that you know all about these things. One thing I've always had trouble with is this idea of specializing topics, and I think it's something that comes from marketing people rather than technical writers. So this idea that we have to add company names, product names to almost everything that we write. And I know in many mechanisms, DITA obviously has ways that you can deal with these problems, but I never actually saw the value of actually adding these things in the first place. So the fact that you've got mechanisms to reduce the problem that you've created is not really an excuse for creating the problem itself. So I'm extremely careful when I'm writing to, well, not only explore the value of every word, but particularly words that might act in the future to sort of over specialize that title, especially in the software world where we're having software architecture, where we're reusing bits of software from internally from different projects within one company, and obviously with OEM, original equipment manufacturer type situations where the idea of modern programming is not to recreate what somebody does better. So I do have issues about this tendency in a large percentage of product documentation to overuse company names. I almost can't understand why we have to use company names, and I even have problems where we overuse product names, because actually what you are reducing is, well, I think you're overcomplicating it, you're adding information that isn't really required, and two, you're certainly reducing reusability without using more complex mechanisms. And most of those mechanisms I struggle to understand, to be honest, so I do avoid them. But it is good to have other rules as well. So, I mean, I still use information mapping type ideas. I have a basic number of, shall we say, topic types that I try to use. I think they're useful. They're not so dissimilar to the basic topic types that DITA might define, though my different definitions are looser and I tend to use them in a slightly different way. But I think information mapping, of course, is entirely valid, and I think without information mapping, topic-based writing would be quite a challenge. You need rules, especially when you've got big teams. I primarily work by myself, but with lots of developers, architects, etc. But you still need rules, especially in bigger teams, for how to create effective titles, how to write a good short description if you use them, and really it's always easier to say what not to do, so rules about all the things that you shouldn't do. I think in bigger teams, if you want to use topic-based writing, having a very good rule set, very good style guide, these are absolute prerequisites. And I also like community work, so people basically work on other people's topics to try and improve them, and then use discussions afterwards to try and find good practice. Sorry. But my biggest issue is that, for me, our job is not really to tell people what they want to know, obviously, because we can't really know what they want to know. And this is where my more recent problem. So I was a DITA fan for many years, but I've come to question the faith, because my problem is the real question is, what is actually the user wanting? And when we start building big document sets, even big documents, lots and lots of information, we're really trying to basically take the power of the user away by actually defining everything. This is sort of the supply side model rather than sort of a demand defined model. And I also believe that most writers should only be concerned with writing topics, nothing else. They shouldn't be concerned with management of the information at all. I think you get better results when people are actually focused in their roles. It doesn't mean people can't obviously progress or change or do something different, but I think it's good to have a good role definition. And there's some sort of emerging realities. So chatbots, everyone's talking about chatbots, and I think for very good reasons. But I mean, basically, they're another user interface or channel at the moment. This is probably not going to be the case, because I think chatbots are going to become pretty much ubiquitous and used for almost everything that we can imagine. And in the moment, most chatbots, unless you get to the really exotic ones, still have to be fed content. You still have to feed them. You have to make available content. I'm trying to sort of train my chatbot at the moment, and I just simply don't have enough content for it to eat, to learn stuff. But still, you still have to feed them. They don't have the sort of native capability to find content themselves and make sense of it. And certainly with my relatively simple chatbot, what we're using titles for is basically, in response to a particular request, the chatbot can use the titles to basically ask another question, so to be more specific. So it's a general question, you send basically a manifest of titles back, the chatbot talks to the user, and it basically reads from this manifest of titles, and then selecting the content is relatively easy. So there is a role in that sense for titles. But there's no question about it, topic-based writing or topics are the perfect fodder for chatbots. Chatbots can use them very, very easily, particularly if they're in the right environment to start with. And I'll go on to that a little bit later. What I mean by that, I mean chatbots tend to struggle with most conventional CMSs, I think would be fair to say. But there are other types of content management systems out there where chatbots feel much more at home. In fact, they can live quite happily in these content management systems and virtually run native within them. So we're talking a sort of Git type environment. And while I've talked about chatbots using titles as a way of building a response, clearly chatbots are not going to use them in everyday sort of conversation. It's not a very easy thing to introduce is the sort of topic title. What is it really going to do with it? It's not a response to a question that users asked. So this is why I talk about titles not being necessarily permanent, because they may be there, they may be created, they may be used by the system, but they may not at all be visible to the user, or the person asking the question. And at the end, I don't know how I'm doing for time, but I think I'm doing okay. So I want to talk a little bit about Information 4.0. It's an effort. And there's actually multiple strands to this effort, but certainly in Europe, there's an effort to try and define what content should look like in the age of Industry 4.0. And there's a consortium, EU consortium being created to basically push this forth and to come to some agreement about what really needs to be done about content itself and content management in a wider environment. It's a very big topic, and I'm not going to talk about it in detail here, apart from a few little headlines, but I've provided some links to the consortia web pages, and they're quite interesting and quite challenging, and they're going to hopefully change quite a lot of things, but they're also forward thinking and they're not realistic for today. So basically Information 4.0 is based on the idea that content is molecular. This basically means no more than topic-based, except with one addition, valency, that these topics want to get together to create effectively an answer to a particular question. Dynamic, continuously updated. Well, yeah, this is still a software issue primarily, but I'm absolutely certain ideas related to DevOps will escape from software and hardware-related projects and contaminate many other fields. So I think this idea of continuous update is going to spread very, very rapidly, and given my ignorance, perhaps it already has, but if it hasn't, it certainly will. This is probably the big idea, the offered rather than delivered. So we get away from the idea where we deliver these big doc sets, these big documents, and instead we offer content basically through some UI, which chatbots are a very convenient way, but there are many other possibilities. And we offer it in basically response to a request from a user. Ubiquitous, well, this is from Web 4.0 idea. Spontaneous, yeah, so we need to be able to put together the topics in molecules spontaneously based upon the request, which is defined as a context. The context is simply a set of facts that basically define that particular request, and the mechanism, the back end based upon that context and a few other factors will build the content in specific response to a request from a user. And obviously this profiled automatic, yeah, well, it's got a big data and analytics behind it. Another key issue, which is not really related by these sort of headlines, is that the content and any formatting will be separated completely and delivered by completely different mechanisms. This is quite a technical issue, and it's explained quite well on the website, but it's also going to be quite an interesting challenge for sort of some sort of conventional systems. It makes sense when you sort of read why the justification for this, but it's quite different from what is currently done. And I just wanted to briefly talk about how I'm working, because it sort of colors my view of things and why I'm interested in topic-based writing, but also why I'm sort of maybe straying away from the main road of DITA or any sort of similar things. So basically, I'm working in a very agile environment. DevOps-ish. We haven't really got feedback mechanisms, not at least for content yet, but we're basically working at Jira as ticketing, GitHub for code and also content repository, and we're publishing using Docker, and basically it's an internal HTML. We're not selling externally what we're doing. We have internal customers only, so our problems are not the same as genuinely commercial environments. And we're basically using Markdown, though we're using an editor just because it's easier than the native one in GitHub. And we're basically treating the content exactly like code. Our next stage is to introduce a native chatbot into GitHub so that the HTML will have basically a native chatbot. So that will be our sort of new user interface with very much simplified way that we've organized the information. We haven't got a lot yet because I've basically deleted most of it. But when we build it up again, we'll have a sort of conventional button-based UI, but probably more usefully this little chatbot, which will consume all these topics and nicely formed topics and very well-defined topics. And eventually, we hope to work out how to actually deliver this context-based search as well, which we're quite some way away from. And as I said, I'll provide some sort of references or links, and that is about it from me.
Put those links back up, and I will, folks, everybody, I'll get a copy of those links and put them on the event page also, so you guys will have them accessible. Make sure that you're connected to make sure. All right, we've got some questions, but this is your time to fill them in and type more questions as you had them. Rob, that was amazing. That was really, really good. You had a lot buried in there. And I'm so glad we recorded, because I know that when I watch this again, as I know I will, that I'll see and hear more with each viewing. It was dense, full of key concepts and ideas, and almost subtle. Like it would, yeah. So anyway, type your stuff in right now. Here's what's coming up. Our next mastermind session is next week. These are monthly driven member only session groups where you present specific challenges and get help right now. We have 3 of them. One is everything TechCom, one is Arbor Text focused, and one is Windchill focused. It is a collaborative sort of support group kind of thing where everybody gets a chance to talk to their peers and me and figure out what there's going on. Also, in our dojo session in November, we're having Gail Naylor. She's at Facebook. She's a new technical writer, and she's going to talk about how volunteering for open source projects can get you a job. It was a great story, and actually, she's the current chair of the East Bay STC, and she's been at Facebook a little while, and she's going to talk about her journey. And next week, we have a special session in between the standard dojos. Keith Shingley Roberts will be here, and he's going to talk about keys. So this is your month for DITA. We are talking topic-based writing, which you can't write good DITA without good topic-based writing. And I'll come back to that in just 1 second. Or at least it's my opinion anyway. But Keith is going to be here to talk about keys just next week. So where do you sign up? Go to tcdojo.org, scroll down to the bottom of the page, and everything is listed there. All right, Rob, there's a couple of questions. Here's the first one. The first one was about resources, and we covered that already. Here's the next one. These ideas make complete sense. They're fantastic, actually, but can you talk more about the application as it applies to roles within the document lifecycle? What role do authors, information architects, taxonomists, release coordinators, etc., do tangibly to implement these ideas and make sure that management of source topics works without sacrificing the quality of output design and information sets? That is a complicated question.
Yeah, I guess the simple answer, from a management point of view, it would probably mean that most of those people don't actually have a job. I mean, it's simple as that. Because all release-related things would be dealt with entirely by the normal software project management. It wouldn't be separate. So the content and the code sort of live almost harmoniously in the same little boxes. So some of the conventional roles in big companies who have big technical writing staff simply wouldn't exist anymore.
Excellent.
But it does mean you can pay the good ones more.
I was going to say, Rob, I know that that's a simple question and it's a complicated one. I don't know. I will send you the question after the session. So if you write a blog post and want to answer it in a couple of different ways,
Absolutely.
send me the links and I'll make sure that that gets published and attached to the presentation. All right, here's another one. Frankenbooks. Yeah, this is the most common objection, but it's always struck me as more of a fear. I'm an expert in writing this book-oriented way, and I don't want to create content that's substandard. Oh, not a question, but a comment. All right. I love that you call them Frankenbooks, and I that is the one that I always hear too. Sounds like you hear it. No?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think it's less a problem with DITA and more a problem with implementation. I was involved in a sort of mainly failed implementation project for DITA, and that's sort of, yeah, I got burnt fingers from that, and that's probably led to me, yeah, having certain issues about, you know, certainly conventional views of DITA anyway.
All right, excellent. Here's one. So, what skills do we, the good ones, need to develop to stick around? More development of skills, wider skill set, any recommendations?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously continuous learning is absolutely essential in any job. But I mean, for me, technical writing is what it says. You know, it's exactly what it says. You need to be a bit technical, and you need to be able to write well. And if you have those skills, then that's pretty much, you know, what you need. And if you can go into a company and say, yeah, I'm not a programmer, but I can really understand what's going on, but I can definitely write a lot better than you're ever going to be able to do, and this is the value, and then that's where your job is.
I had to laugh. I closed the mic so I wasn't laughing all over. But yeah, that's exactly it, right? It's not just filling out forms. It's really thinking about what you're writing and writing it well and presenting it well. That is fantastic. All right, here's one more. You know, so you said you had used topics in non-compliant DITA topics. What do you mean by that?
I just don't follow the strict DITA rules, so I change the morphology when it suits me, when it's useful.
All right, I love that.
But because I'm not using you know,
Oh, Rob?
I'm not using HPL, I'm not using, you know, any, and I'm the only one who doesn't matter. Yeah.
Right, you got more places to be flexible. Oh, here was one.
Exactly.
The short description. You said it was you use it to help people decide whether to read the topic or not. I thought that was classic DITA. It's not?
Yeah, absolutely. Except my topic, it's not a topic. It's a massive collection of topics. So absolutely, it's totally classic DITA. It's just I don't have, you know, in theory, I should have 30 of them as part of the, you know, the flow of text. I just have one of them. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with lots of what DITA says. It's just that I don't want 30 short descriptions. I just need one for my purposes.
Sure. Just clarification. And I totally just want to play chatbots with you right this minute. That just sounds so much fun. I hope everybody else thinks so too. All right, Rob, that was great. Thanks for doing this. I think we're gonna have you back to focus on a couple of these specific things, the little nuggets that were all over this. And I say subtle only because it passes right by, but it's a significant thought. So thanks again for coming. I'll send you the question log. And thanks to everybody for coming and asking great questions.
Thank you and have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.